Hello, everyone. This is Dana from NexGen, and welcome to Me Inc. Before we get started, I'd like to do something a little different and go right into story time.
Okay, let me tell you a little story. I was on a Zoom call and I put I think it was lamb chops in the oven and I had it for about an hour. That's usually how long I cook it for. So I was on the Zoom call for little less than an hour. And then after the Zoom call, I realized that I had not smelt any lamb chops. So I'm like, okay, what's going on? So I realized the entire time that the oven was not working. Now, the stove worked perfectly, but the oven did not. So after paying about $99 to have someone come by and tell me that the part doesn't exist anymore and I would have to get a new stove, I went to the store and purchased a new stove. Then I want to say about a month or two later, I went to go lay down in my bed. Well, the bed fell apart. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to need a new bed. Well, mattress, box spring, or what have you. So I says, okay, I'm going to have to go buy a new bed. So then I want to say about 3 or 4 months later, I turned on my computer and for some reason it was having issues. So and I told you about it before. So long story short, I ended up buying a new computer. Now, what all three things had in common was that I owned them for at least 10 years. The bed and the stove or the range was over 20 years. So I had to buy these things or replace them. So that's one thing that they had in common. The other thing that I had in common with all three of these things was that I actually did 0% financing. So this Me Inc. series, I thought it would be a good idea to talk about 0% financing, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Stay tuned. I hope everyone has had a wonderful week. So, to continue my saga on 0% financing, I'd like to back up and let you know that when I need things that are outside of my budget, and that's key, then I have several options. So, in purchasing the range, the computer, and the bed, I had three options. The first option is to pay cash or use my credit card and then pay the balance off in full. The second option that I had
is to borrow from myself. And I've talked about that in previous videos. I usually do that when I have expenses or a purchase that's going to exceed six figures, or I'm going to use it for an investment. And then the final option that I have is 0% financing. So when I'm talking about 0% financing, I must disclose to you, full disclosure, I tend to lean more toward 0% financing, especially if I already have an account with the store or the business, or they're offering additional perks, if you will. But when I use 0% financing, I use it for purchases, like I said before, outside of the budget. And businesses offer 0% financing on large purchases to encourage us to buy their goods and services. So when I'm looking at 0% financing, I am looking at it from a perspective of making sure that I have at least 6 months expenses in the bank, or that I have access to 6 months of expenses. Because if something is to go wrong, for example, when we had the furlough, I knew that I would not be missing any payments. Because again, when they offer 0% financing, or with anything that's financing, they do have guidelines that I needed to adhere to. So the first thing is I have to be financially mature. I also have to be disciplined. I need to make sure that the payments are made on time and that the balance is paid before the promotional period is up, because a lot of times they count on me missing that promotional period so that the interest that was deferred would come into play. And I'm going to talk about the definition, a couple of definitions that I think would be helpful. And to do this, of course, we go back to the spend plan, or the budget. And that's how I know what money is allotted for my expenses. And for those that are outside of my budget, I have a plan for that. And that's why it was so important for me to have a savings account, or put it in my money market, to where if anything should go wrong, I could actually tap into that. Again, I would only use the 0% financing for necessities. And in my line of work, I do not consider a vacation a necessity, but business trips are. But of course, I would not use the financing unless it was promotional. And I'll talk about that in a minute. I also need to make sure that I have an exit strategy. And what I mean by exit strategy is I go back to the 6 months of expenses, or I actually have the money to make the payment, or I am confident that I will. Because a lot of times what people will do, and this is something that we did back in the day, if you will, is we would go for these 0% financing, and at the end of the period, we're hoping that we are able to jump on another one. But in these days and times, I definitely don't rely on that. So let me go ahead and go through some definitions of the 0% financing, because there's actually two that sometimes people confuse. Sometimes people confuse zero interest loans with deferred interest loans. Now, a deferred interest loan is that you will not pay any interest if the balance is paid before the promotional period ends. For example, the bed that I purchased is deferred interest. So as long as I make the payments and I pay the balance in full before the promotional period end, which is 60 months, then I will be only responsible for the principal payment. But if I do not comply with the terms of the contract, and that's exactly what I have as a contract, then the interest will be that I'll be responsible for goes all the way back to when I made the purchase. So it is as though I did not take advantage of the 0%. So whatever the percentage is, it might be 25%. So all that interest that is held, if I do not comply with the terms of my agreement, then I will end up having to pay the entire interest payment along with the principal. Now, with a zero interest loan, we would have it to where it's only what's left. So let's say that I started out with $15,000 and the promotional period is 1 year. And at the end of the 12 months, the balance is 10,000. Then the interest would be off of the 10,000, not the original 15,000. Now, how you would know that is you would actually need to look at the statement. Well, before you do that, make sure that the agreement that you sign is what you agree to. And you're verifying it when you receive the statement. An example of a zero interest loan would be your credit card. So if you received a credit card in the mail, which I know some of us do, and it talks about 0% interest for 12 months, 15 months, or 18 months, that's an example of a zero interest loan. So you've got that. Because, of course, the balance is going to be different. So whatever is left at the end of the promotional period, that's what you're going to be paying interest on. Now, an example of deferred interest is the range that I purchased, the computer, and the mattress. So the interest rate is 0 during the promotional period. So if I pay the balance before the end of the promotional period, which I will, then I get the 0%. If I don't, then all of the interest from the start of my promotion period, I will be responsible for. So let's go ahead and take a look at a statement. Okay, this is a credit card statement. So on this credit card, the balance started out at 0. Now, the new balance is not what was accrued in the month. It was actually accrued over several months. So that's why the balance is so high. Then you see the minimum payment that is going to need to be made. So it's very important that you pay attention to the minimum payment, and then right next to it is the minimum payment, is the payment due date. And so what I like to do is I like to make the payment before, at least 2 weeks before the due date. That way, if there's any challenges, I can take care of it right away. Now, if you go right underneath that, it talks about late payment warning. So if they don't receive the minimum payment of $283 by the date, which is April 22nd, and for the record, they do have the payment, then I would be responsible for an additional fee of up to $40. So that's the reason why I want to make sure that I pay at least the minimum, which is usually more, but I would like to pay it, or I normally have it paid 2 weeks before the due date. And then underneath that, if you look at if you only make the minimum payment, then I would pay off the balance in 21 years, and I would also pay an additional $10,000. Now, that's if I don't make any other purchases, and I've talked about that in a previous video. So this is a promotion, I believe, for 15 months, 12 or 15 months. But it said that if you make the payments of $452, then you will be able to pay off this balance. Now, if it increases, everything else changes, then I'm going to be paying an additional almost a little over $2,000. But of course, this is a 0% promotional credit card. It is what I was talking about before. This one is what we call the zero interest loan. So to take advantage of that, I need to make sure that I'm in compliance. So this is one part of the statement. Now we're going to look at the other part of the statement. So on this part of the statement, we are looking at, you can see at the top, it talks about the total interest for this period. As you can see, it's zero. Now, keep in mind, I've been making charges for I think about a few months now. So that $14,000 that you had seen is actually months worth of purchases. So as you can see in 2022, the total fees and interest charged has been zero. So that's a good thing. So you're taking a look at the billing period. Now, if you see for purchases, the APR is 10.99. That is what it would be if I was not under the promotional rate. But underneath it, we have promotional purchases. So the promotional purchases expires this August. And you will notice right next to it the balance that's subject to the interest rate of whatever it will be, because it may not be 10.99%, because we know that the rate is increasing. Is $13,742.76. And that is different from my new balance. So that's why that is an example of zero interest loans. Whereas the other, which is deferred, is for a specific purchase or purchases. Okay, let's see. What's so good about these 0% financing? Well, usually it is for people that have excellent credit. And when we talk about excellent credit, we're talking about a credit score of 720, 740 and above. So those are the people that are going to usually be receiving these promotions. And it's basically an interest-free loan. And of course, I go back to what I said before, is that you want to make sure that if you're going to use the 0% financing, that you respect the terms and conditions of the contract so that you can take advantage of the interest-free loan. And after the period, the promotional period, you will actually have a positive payment history. So, as I said before, I already had accounts for my for the range and the computer. So all I did was take advantage of the promotional period or the promotion. Now for the bed, I actually had to open a new account. So when I opened the new account, after all the payments have been made for my bed, computer, and range, I will actually have a positive payment history. And of course, they have another side when you take advantage of the 0% financing. Now, when the ones that we receive in the mail, you want to make sure, especially when there are what we call balance transfers, even though it's 0%, you want to make sure that there's no fees attached to it. Because in a way that kind of defeats the purpose in my mind, because you're paying them up front. So the fees could be 3%, 4%, 5%, and the minimum is $10. So for me, that's the bad side. Another, what I would consider bad, is that if I had paid it outright, whether I used cash or my credit card, now I have monthly payments that I have to pay attention to. So that's what I would put in the bad category. Another thing is that my credit score could be temporarily lowered. And what I mean by that is when I purchased the range and the computer, I already had an account with those stores, so they didn't have to do a credit check. However, for the bed, I opened a new account, which means they had to do a hard inquiry on my credit. So that temporarily lowered my credit score. And again, not really worried about it, because after a few months, my credit score will go back to where it was. Another thing that I think is a negative that I didn't put on here is if you plan on making any big purchases like a house or a car or anything like that, if you have to open a new account like I did for my bed, that could be a challenge. Maybe not if you can explain it. But other than that, those are the only things that I can see that I would consider bad or not good. So let's go ahead to the ugly. Now, the 0% financing really doesn't work if I had out of control spending. For example, if I used my 0% credit card and I was out of control with it, using it for purchases that I would not normally make, and I'm not paying attention to making my payments on time, or I don't have a emergency fund or a backup, so that if something should happen like a furlough or what have you, that I don't have any money to make the payments on time. Because if I don't make those payments on time, or if I'm late, then the store or the merchant or the credit card company, they can come in and remove the 0% financing agreement. Now, I don't know if they do this anymore, so if they do, correct me in the comments, but it's not only the regular payments that I would be making on the 0% financing, but if I had other credit cards or other financing out there that I missed a payment on or something happened, that can also affect this 0% financing. Now, I remember hearing about it, so if I'm wrong about that, please go ahead and correct me in the comment section. Also, you want to make sure whenever you're doing a 0% financing, you make sure you read the contract to make sure there are no prepayment penalties. A lot of times when I was talking about the bad, when you don't want to keep making payments every month and you just want to go ahead and get it over with and go ahead and make the lump sum payment before the promotional period, sometimes they have what they call a prepayment penalty. So you want to make sure that that is not in your contract. So how do you know what's in your contract? Okay, before you sign it, let's go ahead and read that fine print. Okay, these are just a few of the things that we want to look for when we are using the 0% financing. As I said before, you want to pay attention to see if there's any balance transfer fees. You have this big 0%, it's in big font, and balance transfers and all this other good stuff. And then in little tiny letters, you see this 3% balance transfer fee. Now, I don't have one to show you because I shredded everything, but you want to make sure that you're in agreement with the balance transfer fee. It might be to your advantage. I don't know, but it's not to mine. Okay, the other thing is that the 0% may be for purchases, but not for balance transfers or cash advances. Now, back in the day, it used to. So you want to make sure to see what the 0% was applied to. Was it applied to only purchases? Was it only balance transfers? Were they allowing you to take cash advances without a fee? You want to make sure that you read the fine print and that you're in agreement with it. The other thing, as I was talking about before, is prepayment penalties. So you want to make sure that if that's what you're agreeing to, then you know that there will be a prepayment penalty. So these are some of the things you want to look for in the fine print. So if any of these fees or prepayment penalties exist, I don't deal with it. And if it's purchase but not balance transfer, I just adjust accordingly. Now, for the credit card, mine is for purchases, and I don't have anything to balance transfer unless I balance transfer the computer, the bed, and the range. That would be neat, right? But this is only the 0% that I took advantage of was only for purchases. So it allowed me to keep my money market growing. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. Okay, that is my good, bad, and ugly on 0% financing. 0% financing can be used in your personal life as well as for your business. And so, all the things that I talked about, you would pay attention to for your personal purchases as well as your business purchases. So if you have any questions or there's something else that you want to talk about, or there's some other things that you found in 0% financing that you would like to address, go ahead and put it in the comments section. Thank you. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And have a great weekend, and I will see you next week.